And the wind was blowing the curtain on it. Of course, you want to shut the window. The mouse
I've lost my voice. It's going to be fantastic. Yeah, I thought you'd be happy. Are we nearly all inside? Anyone left out on the bleachers? No. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have a little bit of shush for half a moment, thank you all for making the effort to come along. What?
7 o'clock.
What's the time?
You have 5 seconds.
5 seconds? Oh, my apologies. I've got to...
There we go.
Right. Done? Sold. Okay, thank you everyone for turning up. This is being live streamed around the country. I don't know who's going to be watching it, and hopefully when I'm talking they're not. But on this occasion, which is quite a major change, we hope, for the benefit of Australia and the benefit of the Liberal Party. We are here to help and support the Liberal Party. I was at Roma about a month and a half ago, and there were 55 blokes I was talking to, and at the end of it we went and had a bit of a party for one of them, and every one of them was absolutely furious with the Conservative efforts in this nation. And all I hear about as I go around, because I was at Gundawindi shortly afterwards on another one, same thing happened. People are so disappointed in what we've got. So Graeme Haycroft, who's talking shortly, has pulled a bit of a tribe together to try to do something about it. We're not guaranteeing anything, but we are genuinely concerned, especially for our children and more importantly our grandchildren, because we have a nation that's sliding into the sewer. So collectively here, thank you all for being here to hear what Graeme has to say. But before that, there's a gentleman here whom I've been reading regularly in the Spectator magazine, Professor James Allen. I haven't got a clue what he's going to talk about, but every time I read what he has to say, I unfortunately have to agree with him. So everyone, Professor James Allen.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Heath and Graeme. Look, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge all the people who stood up and spoke up against the 2 years of COVID lockdown thuggery. So these were the made up out of thin air social distancing rules, the worst attacks on our civil liberties in 2 centuries, and that's the UK Supreme Court Judge John Assumption's words, not mine. I agree with them. The total abandonment of what we'd previously been the sort of near religiously embraced notion of informed consent out the window, the fear-mongering, handcuffing of pregnant women, the disastrous closing down of schools that has seen a precipitous drop in our students' results. And by the way, before lockdown, we were behind Kazakhstan, so we didn't have a lot of room to play with. The dubious rules about masking, which we now know they just made up. the inability to read and understand data, the canceling and censoring and trying to fire people, including 3 of the top 10 epidemiologists in the world, the people who wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, so the professor at Oxford, Stanford, and Harvard, they were all censored. They tried to fire them. The preferring of models to data, they copied a guy from Imperial College who had a record of being wrong by orders of magnitude when it came to BSE, which is mad cow disease, and foot and mouth disease. But this time they just decided to believe him, and he was wrong yet again. So models became like some gospel-like resource. The weaponizing of the police. I mean, I grew up in the sort of east end of sort of working class Toronto, and a really pro-police family. When I went through law school, I was the most pro-police person ever. And by the end of COVID, I wouldn't cross the street to help some of these police officers if they were on fire. The biggest transfer of wealth ever, and by far, from poor to rich, and from young to old, and that was because of the steroidal printing of money and the massive asset inflation. Old people have assets, rich people have assets. It was the 2 best years ever to be a billionaire. And if anyone in this room thinks bills of rights are a good idea, I can tell you that in 2 years, in the entire world, there is not a single instance, not one case where the judges anywhere used a Bill of Rights to alleviate these massive inroads on our civil rights, civil liberties. They are worthless instruments. That didn't happen in Canada, Britain, the US, nowhere. And by the way, if you don't think the current state of Melbourne is related to the fact that it had the longest and most brutal lockdown in the world, then you're probably a Labour Party voter. Let me start with a joke, because, I tend to do that in Canada. And because we're talking about the Liberal Party, the idea of a joke comes immediately to mind. But this is the story of, that Ronald Reagan used to tell this story, by the way. It's about a town in the U.S. and the Democrat Party decided to hold a big fundraiser at the big convention center, and they had all of the Democrats coming to town. And outside the convention center, there was this young kid. He'd set up a stall. He had a crate of really young dogs, and the kid was yelling to everyone, "Come buy a Democrat puppy! Come buy a Democrat puppy!" And so, about 2 weeks later, it turned out the Republicans were also having a convention, and they had it at the same convention center. Sure enough, the same kid is set up and yet again, but this time he's yelling, "Come buy a Republican puppy, come buy a Republican puppy." Now, one of the really geniuses in the legacy media wandered over to the kid and said, "I was here 2 weeks ago. Like, what's going on here? You were calling them Democrats and now you're calling them Republicans." And the kid said, "Yeah, but now they've opened their eyes." Know something about it. And by the way, has anyone heard about the big giant whale that has decided to transition? He's going to call himself Maybe Dick. Okay, so what I want to do tonight is just take you very quickly, give you a sense of Australia's constitutional place in the world. This is for people who have insomnia. I should be able to fix that. I'm just setting the stage for Graeme. Australia has one of the oldest written constitutions in the world. We're about, depending on how you measure a little tiny country in Europe, we're either the 4th or 5th oldest continuously operating written constitution. That is astounding. We also have what is probably the most American written constitution in the world. When they were deciding what to do in the late 1800s, they basically sensibly looked around and decided to copy what had worked. And so they copied the US, and then they stuffed it into the British Westminster parliamentary model. So we have a combination or amalgam of the 2 most successful constitutional models in the history of the world. The British unwritten parliamentary sovereignty model, and then the written constitution is an American Madisonian, because the guy who largely wrote the U.S. Constitution was James Madison, who was the 4th president of the United States. He was a great drafter of the Constitution. He was a terrible president. He started the War of 1812. We learn about that in Canada. I'm Canadian. Because we won. It was a tie. They attacked us. The Americans don't learn about it anymore because they didn't win. A side note, if you want to know why it's called the White House, it's because during the War of 1812, the Brits burned down the existing building, and when they redid it, they painted it white. So that came out of the War of 1812. But when I say we copied the American Constitution, Australia is very unusual in the way it is set up. So first of all, we copied American federalism. Now I know I teach this. Australians are instinctively centralist. The basic idea most Australians have is like it's just a duplication. Get rid of all the states. Let's be a central, just one level of government. And you know what? If you look around the world, those kind of countries don't do nearly as well as real federal countries. Germany, the US, Canada, much wealthier than France, Britain, per person. Here's what the normal attitude is, well, it's just duplication. But in a properly working federal system, there are fewer civil servants per capita than there are in centralized setups. And I say to people, do you want to know why you can have one level of government and no public servants? Go and visit the University of Queensland. If there's a more centralized place in the entire world, I don't know what it is. And so, federal systems work for two reasons if they're done properly. One is you satisfy more preferences. Imagine a very contentious issue. I'll pick one that's not too contentious, like regulating prostitution. If you have one size fits all for the whole country, you're going to end up somewhere where 52% are happy and 48% aren't. If we do it in American terms, if you leave it to the states, California, New York, Massachusetts will be very liberal. The Midwest and the South will be much more conservative, and you will satisfy 75% of preferences. There'll be unhappy people in Austin, Texas, and upstate New York. But real federalism means delegating decisions down and having different outcomes. But the main reason federalism works is because it leads to competition. And you have to have differences. And so Australia talks about cooperative federalism. That's like talking about, I don't have federalism. The whole point of federalism is to have differences. In the US, there are millions of different tax rates. Same in Canada. And Australians think, oh, I don't want the states to have income tax power. We are the only federal system in the world that doesn't have income tax power. And what it would mean is you'd pay 25% top marginal rate to the center, and then each state could decide for itself. And you know what ends up happening? In Alberta, you pay 0% provincial tax, and in Ontario, you pay about 20%. If we did it properly, Victoria would be bankrupt and we wouldn't be looking after them here in Queensland. But no, you see, so what is the point of doing anything properly if you live in Victoria when you know you're going to get bailed out? There's no answer to that. And so we opted for the American federal system, one list of powers to the center, everything else to the states. The goal was to have really strong states. And basically our high court has destroyed federalism in this country. And the second thing we copied from the Americans is bicameralism. So, Australians think it's normal to have an upper house that's really strong. It's very unusual. The Americans, because we copied it from them, and Italy. I'm Canadian. The upper house, no province has an upper house. They're all like Queensland. And the federal parliament has an appointed upper house. They do nothing. So if you win an election in Canada and you want to sort of fix the budget, you just do it. Here, you have to go and bargain with someone from Tasmania who comes from an extended family and has a few extra friends. Because the upper house is not nearly as representative. You get 2 per state in the US. That's because, so if you vote for the Senate in California, your vote is worth about 1/76th what it is in Wyoming, which has the fewest number of people. In Australia, 12 senators per state, so your vote in Tasmania is worth about 16 times more than it is in New South Wales. And you've got this result where it's very difficult to do anything. People take that as normal. It's not normal. It's very unusual in the democratic world. Again, New Zealand has no upper house. Britain, it's appointed. They don't do anything. They block things for maybe 6 months. Another thing we did, we copied the American system of having the capital city and no state. That's very unusual. What you get then is an entity where all of the bureaucrats live. In Washington, D.C., 96% of voters vote Democrat. 96%. It also means you cannot get a conviction. If you prosecute a Democrat, the jury pool is 96% Democrat. They won't convict. If they're a Republican, they convict you before the guy has finished his opening address. Guilty. I'm making that part up. But we have the same sort of problem here. It's much better to have a capital that's part of a state. And of course, people in the territories could not vote until 1973 because we copied that from the Americans. To this day in Washington, D.C., they have no vote for the House of Representatives and they have no vote for the Senate. There are no senators from Washington, D.C., because the idea is it's a sort of union of existing colonies. The two things we didn't copy from the Americans, because we copied those two really important things, those three, we decided not to have a Bill of Rights, which was a good call. Sort of half my professional life I've been arguing against these things. As late as 1970, there were two countries in the world with a national Bill of Rights, the U.S. and a country with an even older Bill of Rights than the U.S. Does anybody know what it is? It is France. But it was not justiciable, the Declaration of the Rights of Man. So it was really only the U.S. where you could go to court and ask a bunch of unelected judges to rewrite the laws of marriage or rewrite the abortion laws. These are fundamentally important questions, and you're handing it over to people from the lawyerly caste. And by the way, 50 years ago, lawyers, because this data is public in the U.S., if you give money to a political party in the U.S., it's public information, so they know. Lawyers 50 years ago were to the right of the median voter. There was a conservative profession. Today, lawyers are one of the most left-wing occupations you can find. If you want to find the most woke, go to the biggest law firm in Sydney and walk in the door. You better have your pronoun tattooed on your forehead. These are incredibly left-wing sort of professions. And you're handing over decision-making to these people. It's a real significant problem. And so bills of rights, I don't think there's no more scope to speak your mind in Canada with an aggressive constitutionalized bill of rights than there is here without one. The progressive forces have tried to bring in a bill of rights twice via constitutional referenda. The second time was in 1988, and it lost in every state. I don't think it got over 33% anywhere, so it made the vote for the voice look successful. And the other thing we didn't copy was the amending formula. People go, oh, it's so hard to change the Constitution of Australia. Balderdash. Here's what you have to do to change the Constitution. You have to get half the people in your country to agree with you plus one. So hard. And then you also have to get half of the people in over half the states. In the US, you need 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the state legislature. It's impossible. And in Canada, you need that for most things, 2/3 of the provinces. And then for some things, you need every single province plus the provincial, so you need all the legislatures to agree. So in Canada, nobody talks about a republic. Nobody. There's just as many people who want one, but it's impossible to change the Canadian Constitution because the tiniest province, Prince Edward Island, has about 140,000 people in a country of 38 million. They have a veto. The Prince Edward Island economy is run on growing potatoes and the incredible quirk of history that a book called Anne of Green Gables is on the Japanese reading list for schools. And so in the summer, the number of Japanese tourists that come to Prince Edward Island to see where Anne would have lived had she been real. She is not real, but they did have the good sense to build a house. The day they take this book off the high school reading list in Japan, the Prince Edward Island is just screwed. But this is ridiculous, right? That is so hard to change. Now, I'm a constitutional monarchist, but that's a ridiculous. So the problem in Australia is that the radical progressive forces don't like the outcomes. If we had left it to the political classes, which is what they do in the US, the voters don't get a say, only politicians to change the Constitution, same in Canada, we would be a republic today and we would have the voice. So we have a very good amending formula. We're also incredibly unusual in our voting systems. We have compulsory preferential voting. About 4 countries in the world have compulsory voting. And, the Greeks don't really take it seriously. So if you don't vote, they don't really penalize you. And neither do the Belgians. Here they'll actually try to fine you. So we take it now I'm not, I'm sort of agnostic. Where's Dave Pello? I'll explain agnostic to you later, buddy. But I'm agnostic about compulsory voting, but it does up the voting rate. I don't know that there's any evidence that it moves right or left, because it forces people to vote who tend to vote slightly right. But we also have, and Canadian and U.S. voting rates now are terrible. They're, even for a presidential election, you're lucky to get into the 60s. And the recent Canadian election was in the 50s. Like 56% of Canadians are voting. Bad. New Zealand doesn't have compulsory voting, and they've managed to stay in the mid-high 80s. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they have sheep hanging out around the polling booths or something. But the other thing we have is preferential voting, and nobody has that. We have it. A tiny little Pacific island has it, and the state of Alaska. And so there's really, in the world of voting systems, there's two camps. There's the proportional voting, which is all through Europe. And basically what proportional voting does is it appeals to your initial sense of fairness and hopes you don't have a functioning brain. And so basically what happens is if party A gets 8% of the vote, then they get more or less 8% of the seats in parliament. Who could be against that? Except here's what the problem is. All the parties come to the election promising things they can never deliver because they know they'll never win a majority. And so once you have the election, then you have bargaining. In Belgium, it can take over a year. And then you get a coalition. And it's all done away from the voters, out of sight. The elites do it, and they never come close to delivering on anything. And so the problem with proportional representation systems is you have no idea as a voter what end product's going to be. The other main camp is the one that came out of Britain, started with first past the post, and we're a branch of that. And that's a majoritarian voting system where you force the parties to make all the compromises before the election. In the case of the Liberal Party, they make so many compromises, they really don't go to the election with any policies. And so first past the post is the voting system that goes back the oldest in the world, Britain, Canada, the US. It's like a horse race. That's why they call it first past the post. You have your constituencies, each one delivers one person, and if you win by one vote, you're the winner. We have a branch of that. It also delivers majoritarian government, so that part's good. But it's preferential, and that means it's basically a protection racket for the two main parties. When the two parties are offering different things, it works fine. When the two parties decide to be exactly the same, and to prove my point, I point to the Victorian Liberal Party, which has just replaced their leader with a woman who was the only MP who was outspokenly for the voice, for the treaty. She sided with John Pizzuto against more redeeming. She's all in on the renewable camp. This is the leader of the, let me say this again, Liberal Party. So who do you vote for? At any rate, we have preferential voting, and that's us, and I think it's Nauru. And then in our so we've had compulsory voting since 1924. We've had preferential voting since 1918. And since after the Second World War, I think it's 1948, the Senate has had a form of proportional representation. So again, nobody gets the last big party to have a majority was John Howard, and he completely wasted it. There's so many good things. Instead, he decides to bring in work choices. Now, I'm not against that. I'm a small government guy, but anyone with a functioning brain could have seen that if he centralizes how you run the labor relations, when labor gets in, they're going to make it way worse, which is exactly what everyone said, exactly what's happened. The system before Howard, when it was done by the states, was way more liberal, so it was like a disastrous decision by Howard. And lastly, let me finish with how party leaders are chosen. The 200-year-old rule was basically you leave it to the elected MPs, to the caucus, the party room. I'm not drinking this because I want to, but I feel like a bad guest to a host if I don't sort of pretend to drink this. So, nice Californian Chardonnay. Obviously, not paying your employees enough, Heath. My friend paid me to say that. He's not going to get into trouble. But That's the long-standing way, and it's changed everywhere but Australia. So in Britain, they have this convoluted system where the MPs can get it down to the last two, and then everybody who's in the party can vote. And that can allow the party members to stop a Malcolm Turnbull from becoming Labour, but it can't let you pick the person you want. Canada has gone to a system where every single paid-up party member votes for the leader on the same basis as the cabinet minister. So in Canada right now, the Conservative Party in Canada has about 36 million people to our, 24, 25 million, so about, another 50% for those of you who did math. And the Canadian Conservative Party has 750,000 party members. Why would they join? Because you get an equal say in picking the party leader. The Liberal Party in Australia has, I'm guessing 25-20, Campbell's going down. Yeah. Why would you be a member? You don't get to decide anything, and they throw you out if you have any views. So we have to change that. We really do. I'll finish with another joke. Some of you have heard it already, but some of you won't have, and it's one I like because it's the story of Campbell Newman. And he was walking down on the Gold. How many places do you have down there, Campbell? I don't know. One of his many estates. He was down there on the beach, and he stumbled on this Arabic-looking bottle, which he picked up, and he inadvertently rubbed it, and Andrew's heard this. Genie comes out, and Campbell immediately thinks, do I get 3 wishes? And she says, yes, you do. But I'm a very special genie, and for every wish that you asked for, every single Teal party member and anyone who votes for the Teals will get twice what you got. So Campbell thinks for a minute and he goes, I could use another $1 million. So you have to suspend your disbelief here, but assume that he says, I could use another $1 million. So the genie blinks and she says, check your bank balance. But remember, every Teal voting person in Australia now has $2 million. What's your second wish? Campbell thinks, wouldn't mind a sort of finely tuned German sports car. So she blinks and she says, go home, check your driveway. But remember, every Teal voting person in Australia now has 2 top-of-the-line BMWs. What's your final wish? Campbell's a canny fellow. He thinks for a minute and he looks at the genie. He says, I've always wanted to donate a kidney. Thank you. Thank you very much.
James, I can assure you no one would want my kidney or liver, so I'm not going to participate. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason we're trying to do something for the benefit of Australia is mainly due to the next speaker. Graeme Haycroft is one of Australia's leading experts, I'm reading this because I've got a bad memory, in industrial relations and employment engagement strategies. You can Google him if you must, and you'll find he was a pioneer in reforming the shearing industry in the early 90s, and for 2 years in the mid-90s, he and his team set up and maintained about a dozen high-rise building sites in Brisbane and on the Sunshine Coast without the help of the CFMEU. By the time he retired from his business in 2012, he was employing over 2,000 people. That's a hell of a lot, because I've got a fair few myself and there's nothing like that. During most of his time, he was also active in the LNP as the chairman of both the Treasury, Economics, the Employment and IR committees. In 2013, because he was bored, he launched the Alternative Red Union, starting with the Nurses Union, the NPAA, which now has nearly 25% of all the Queensland health nurses as members. He did this with his own money to stop the 100 million each year that flows through to the ALP from the Nurses Union. I think that would be inspired by Tony Abbott's call to reform the Liberal Party to prevent the formation of a large member popular party which would destroy the Menzies legacy. He joined Matthew and I to see if we can build a 250,000 member Liberal Party. Please welcome Graeme Haycroft.
Thank you, Heath. Hopefully this is... Oh, here we are. That's right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have questions after I finish with James. First thing, I need to announce this. This project's not a Red Union project. I wrote all the constitutions for the Red Union, about a dozen different ones. And in each one, there is a provision that no member money can be used for any party political process. Right, this is sort of like a party political process, isn't it? So this is a personal project of mine, and Heath, we're using our own money. Now, first of all, we're not, the Liberal Reform Association is not an alternative political party. We're not another Advance Australia. It's a great organisation that does a different thing. We've answered Tony Abbott's challenge to reform the Liberal Party of Australia. By the way, how good is his book? Who's read it? Who's got it? He's up next week. Should go to his book launch. The Liberal Reform Association is just a simple not-for-profit company limited by guarantee. The trading name is the Liberal Reform Association. And it's been set up, designed to communicate with the Liberal Party members and people who want to be part of a reformed Liberal Party. We believe the core problem of the Liberal Party is not the people or the personalities. As much as we see them in the media and go, oh gosh, it's not the problem. We believe, and I sound reasonable for thinking this, it's the rules, not the people. It's the rules which ultimately dictate the behaviour of these people, and it's the rules we have to change. And our goal is to change the rules of... There are 9 separate organisations which make up the Liberal Party, and to transform it from a moribund closed shop of very old people, of which I am one, average age over 70, with barely 0.1% of the population, about 25,000 really, and I think that's an exaggeration, and it's dwindling. We're going to transform it, as James has showed in Canada at Work, to a thriving, engaging, probably a bit chaotic at times, dynamic, member-controlled federation of connected state and territory divisions with a coherent, integrated federal division, which has a total of at least 1% of the population, 250,000, and we can do it. We know where they are. Advance Australia. Matthew Sheehan has their names. He's got 300,000 people on his list. People who would normally expect to join the Liberal Party, they've joined Advance Australia. So we know they're there, and we know that we're seeing them as well as people join us. Now, if we don't do this, so we're primarily just a communication exercise where our role is to run the argument publicly, and the argument is for a large party as opposed to the continuation of a whole series of little closed, tiny parties. The alternative is that if we don't do this, someone else will start a major party, and that will be the end of the Liberal Party. And I would also guess that we'd probably have another guaranteed 2 terms of Labor. So we're here to save the Liberal Party, not to destroy it. Those who are running it have now been doing a pretty good job of that. Well, the facts are there. Let's work together and see what we can do. Now, to my little more formal bits and pieces. What is the purpose of a political party? And I think this has been lost on all the politicians, really. It's very simply to win 50% of the seats plus 1. That's it. Now, let me just go back to Menzies' time. I don't know how many of you read Menzies' Forgotten People essay. It's magnificent. You can see why the guy was a living legend and still a legend today. He defined his forgotten people. And it's interesting looking at the group, and we'll compare it in a minute to the Labor Party constituency, and you can see what's happened over time. He He excluded, first of all, the rich and powerful. He said they can look after themselves. And he excluded also the, if you like, the unskilled workers who were part of the unionised workforce in those days. And he included the salary earners, shopkeepers, skilled artisans, professional men and women, farmers and so on. The middle class, he called them the backbone of the nation. Here's the question. Was that an electoral majority? The answer was no. No. He had to get another group. And that was, those of you students of history realised that was the Catholic workers. Remember the DLP formed? You would have remember the DLP? So Menzies' party originally was focused and built around, the Gutsa was built around the workers as well as these other groups he defined. So let's have a look at the Labor constituency today. And one of the things I've noticed with the conservative, supposedly conservative politicians in Australia is they don't know who their constituents are. Let me help you define who they are. You might be able to add one or two to the group. First of all, you've got your public service bureaucracies, and you've got your charity and not-for-profit section, and that is huge now. It's huge. Then you've got the social service beneficiaries of all the work of those people. They receive money, right? The next group is the beneficiaries of mass immigration. Academia. Jim knows all about that. Big retail business, banking and finance sectors, development lobby, federal, state and local and government bureaucracies. Again, they all benefit from the high immigration model, and they're all part of the Labor constituency. Then don't forget the industry super fund network. It's a $1 trillion network. What's happening? What's happening here? Okay. That it, I must have bumped it. There you go. Righto. Going back to, can you read it now? Yes. Okay, so you've got your industry super network, university educated and salaried workers. Now that's interesting. The salaried workers. They're Labor. We're going to get on to the Liberal constituency. The wages workers, they're ours. They're conservative people. They don't want to change. You've got the childcare and aged care and disability care industries. You've got government teachers. We know that our market for our teachers' union is no more than about 15% of all teachers in the government sector. That's it. When I was teaching in the 60s, it was the other way around. And I was a radical. I was there when we threw paint at LBJ in 1967. I was a red ragger then. And all the guys I taught with, they were all conservative. So things change over time. The mainstream media, ABC and SBS, and then you've got the medical industry regulatory environment, this is APRA, and of course the industry associations in particular. Remember once upon a time the Australia's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Chambers of Commerce, very good, and the CCIQ, David was actually a chairman of that at one stage. It's changed now. What happened? The Labor Party gave them a special little monopoly where they get to issue certificates of origin for our exporters. Guess what the condition is? The condition is you're not allowed to touch the union monopoly, which generates 100 million a year in Queensland alone for the ALP. So they're all very much in favour of things as long as it doesn't interfere with the money going to the ALP. The thing in common with these people, in its generality, they are all paid to turn up to work. They owe their living directly or indirectly to the government. Now, who are the Liberal constituents? This is simple. The small business people, farmers, self-employed people, workers in small business. They have much more in common with their work, with their owners of classic places here. Most of the employees here would be aligned pretty much with Heath. Not all of them, but a fair proportion of them would be, because they've got the same value set. Family people, skilled tradespeople. How many members of the CFMEU would actually vote Liberal if they were asked to? Probably 75% in the house building industry. Why would they be different in the construction building industry? So there's 20,000 in Queensland. 15,000 would vote our way if we asked them. defence personnel, police. One of the common things about all these people is they only paid if they perform. They only paid if they perform compared to the other constituency of they get paid to turn up. And again, is this an electoral majority? Darn tootin' it is. Darn tootin'. We saw it in the Voice. 60% Australia-wide, plus probably 10% didn't vote in that. They would have been for the Voice, would they? No, don't think so. So this is an electoral majority. So the checkout chick and the guy that's driving the truck, for Woolies, they're with us. They're patriotic, they share our values. Whereas the HR person with a university degree, she's with Labor. So our people have got common values. They're patriotic, one flag, thank you very much. Proud of our culture and country. They don't want it changed. They would prefer to pay less tax and look after themselves. They want to own their own home. That's part of reclaiming the dream. They believe the country must be defended. Don't ask the public servants that. Ask the people who are working hard and have got families and have got their own homes and want the kids to have their own homes. Do they believe that they want to be defended against someone else coming down and taking them? You darn tootin' they do. The other thing we already know about is that they're not really big on racist policy. We voted overwhelmingly that Australians wanted to be treated the same way. They understand their jobs depend upon reliable, cheap power. This is really simple. Net zero's got no meaning to them. They want to know, they know, they're smart enough to realise that if you don't have cheap power, you don't have jobs. And they want to conserve our heritage. They want to know about our history. That's why Tony Abbott's book's so important. And they want a Judeo-Christian culture. They ask the question, do we really want immigrants who hate us? Why are we doing this? The thing is, they're not being asked. So the role of a political party, if you like, is to bring those values together and develop policies that will appeal to those groups. And then in an election, you bring them all together and you win, hopefully. When in power, the other part of a political party responsibility is when you're in power, you do what you say you're going to do. You don't say, oh, it's important for us to win next time. No, you're elected to do something, you do it. And if you have confidence in what you're doing and confidence in how the policies were developed, you just do it. So, and we want them to, a little note here, we want them to do what the policies of the party is, not the policies of the Labor bureaucracy. And this is what happens now. It's really depressing. Now, what's stopping the implementation of conservative policies? I want to talk here about the delegate system. It's a little different in every state. But the parties have been captured differently by the delegate system. And I'll talk a little bit about how it's happened in Queensland. And the other states are a little different. But it's all essentially the same principle. Now, we've got, how many tables have we got here? We've got 12 tables. Okay, it's sort of roughly the same number of people at each table, sort of. And how the delegate system works, it goes back to the old days when you need to have a meeting somewhere, you can't all go, so you delegate someone. So this table here would say, righto, can you please sort out between yourself who's going to go? And you would do it, and every table does it, boom, 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 boom. And what would happen is you'd more or less get a representative group and they would go and they'd be fairly representative, right? This is where it gets strange. Because you'd have 12 tables and you probably got 100, wouldn't be 120, but just say the number, there's about 1 to 10, right? And everyone's about the same. Now let's change the situation. What would happen if these tables here, and let's say there's, say there's 50 people in these tables, 6 tables, I'd say there's 60, keep the numbers simple, right? And you'd have 6 delegates for 60 people. But let's say these tables they weren't as full. Let's say these 4 tables just had 2 people at them, and those 2 tables over the back just had 1 person. How many delegates are you going to have? You're going to have 6 delegates. How many people are representing them? Was it 14? 12? Not a lot. Yeah. 14. Okay, 14. So you've got 14 people electing 6 delegates, and over here you've got 50 or 60 people electing 6 delegates. Now, it's these differences in the political parties which have been taken advantage of. And let me just have a look and show you. This is sort of a diagram of the delegate system in the LNP. Has anyone got the faintest idea how it works? No. I've been in the party for 45 years and I don't really even know. What I do know is that the women's section tables and the young Liberal Party, or LNP in Queensland tables, have a lot fewer members and they send the same amount of delegates. Now, what's happened? These rules were written to favour, we must look after the women, we must look after the young people, so we give them a greater entitlement of delegates. And what's happened in Queensland, Senator McGrath, who, by the way, this is no criticism of Senator McGrath, we wouldn't exist. No, he was the only guy, he's the only guy in Parliament who's spoken outside of Parliament in support of us. He helped us get going at the beginning, and he was the only guy that stood up for us when ScoMo and Porter were trying to close us down. ScoMo had done a deal with selling McManus, right? So James was a very hard worker, and what he's done, he hasn't broken any rules. He's looked at the rules and said, I can get people, enthusiastic young people, to go and we can pick up delegateships. We can go to those meetings, and he's got his little team. See, the precondition of doing this is you need a small membership. And then you need a group of tribal friends. In James's case, it's his young staffers and other people. And they take advantage of well-meaning rules. And as a result, we saw 2 weeks ago, as a public meeting, I was there as an observer, there was an election for a delegate position which would result in the Senate pre-selection. David Goodwin was one of the candidates for the Small Business Policy Committee chairman. There are 7 others. One other was very, very good. David would probably be the best candidate in the world for that sort of job. Another candidate, Lynn McCready from Sunshine Coast, was very good. And there were 6 others. One of whom was a staffer of a staffer, I think, worked for Brisbane City Council. Guess who won? The staffer, yeah. Nice young fella, never been in business. So this shows how the assiduous work has built up to the point where, literally, Senate pre-selection is pretty safe. Don't mind that, because I think he's a great job and he's a bloody hard worker. But the problem is, he's also going to decide position 2, position 3, and position 4.
He helped Axe have it, too.
He what?
He helped Axe have it. He was the numbers man.
Yes, well, that's true. But I'm using this as an example. This has happened in every other state as well. So I'm not being critical of the person. It's the rules that have to change. The rules have to change. So what happens when this occurs, of course, is that how does a minority keep control? Well, if they've got control this way, they've got to keep out competing tribes, don't they? So therefore, you need to bring in rules to regulate who can join the party. And that's what's been going certainly in other states. In New South Wales, you virtually can't join the party. That's why the membership's down about 4,000. So our view, in this respect, Heath and I are a competing tribe because we want to introduce a huge tribe of people, which we don't control, don't want to control, we don't have to control. You're just the sheer numbers. That's what we've got to do. And the thing is, we can win this. we can win this. So what needs changing? One vote, one value. No preference for women, no preference for young libs. There's a bit of a distortion in Queensland where with local government, the local Brisbane City Council people are delegates, if you like, to the body which does the pre-selecting for the senators. But councillors in other places and mayors in other places can't be, so that's going to be sorted out. That should be one or the other, either all in or all out. Better to have them all out, keep local government separate. So the most important thing, though, is you have to end this concept of delegate pre-selections. One vote, one value. And we do that more or less we do that now for our local state members and our local federal members. We need to do it for our senators as well. And as Jim pointed out, the Canadians have done this very, very successfully. The members have got to choose the parliamentary leaders. And all the way down, you choose the local council leader, or the mayor, the state premier, or the opposition leader, and even the upper house, and so on. They'll all be voted. So someone who joins the party, and in Canada it's $15, and here it should only be $20. And we know where they are. If you ask Matthew Sheehan's people to cop up $20, 200,000 would. So we know they're here. We're very, very close. We can win this. Oh, yes. That's all we have to do. So for your $20, you get to decide who your local councillor is, who your mayor is, the delegates for say. Who your local state member is, who your federal member is, who your senators are. Not bad for $20. And people are engaged, and the Canadians have shown that it bloody well works. And the other thing is we need open membership. What do you need to know? You need to know, here's the questions. Are you a member or a supporter of another party? That's a toughie. And have you paid the membership yourself? That sort of stops someone buying a lot for somebody else. What else do you need to know? Nothing. And as for, putting the party into disrepute, which is what Heath and I have been accused of doing, I mean, really, we should have, George Brandis, to his credit, wrote a very erudite article about Hasty. And one could argue that put the party in disrepute. Not that I would have thought that anyone would take too much notice of George, but well, that's the criticism had to be credible, doesn't it? So the party is having this is a constitutional year. Every 5 years they have that, and they are reviewing the constitution. And George has been put in charge. Right? George is progressive, that's fine. It would be as bad to have me in charge, right? Because I'm a conservative. There are some progressives in there and they want to have constitutional change. I would look at that and go, oh, that's rubbish, And we're supposed to believe George doesn't look at the conservative stuff, oh, that's rubbish. Of course we're biased. If the party's serious, and I surely hope they will, they need a panel. And George is fine as long as two other Conservatives are there, because that's about the ratio. Okay, here we go. So here's the final point, or final points. When we change the Constitution, we also need to look, in my view, at the objects of the party, because there are many things that are too important for politicians to deal with. It's significant we did not invite any politicians here. Campbell's in the special class. I've always thought he was better than politicians. I did invite Matt Canavan because I think he's the real deal. He couldn't come. We didn't invite anybody else. The politicians are not going to solve this problem. It's going to be ordinary people with a little bit of knowledge of constitutions like I have, can do a little bit of leading, but ultimately it's got to be you people, and just a force throughout Australia rising up to do this. And one of the object changes, we need a couple of things. They need to be in the object so that when the politicians go, oh, that's so hard, I can't do that. You know, how can we have legislation in force which financially favours the other side? The union monopoly generates around about 80 million a year in Queensland alone to the ALP. The legislation could be written and passed in a day, right? That would just stop it in its tracks. They won't do it. So there's no point asking them, no point being friends with them. They've got to know that if you like, it's an object of the Constitution, that anything like that, the fact that the funding is coming from the government, you know, it's $4 a head, you know, for every vote. Who determines the $4 a head? Labor Party. Oh, they're in agreement, of course. But if the Labor Party said, oh, look, we think it should only be $1, what's going to happen? Well, the LNP is going to say, oh, no, taxpayers must pay us $3, you know, all this extra. They can't win that argument. The Labor Party determines it. So that system of public funding in this way has got to go, ultimately, because you can't stand on your own 2 feet if you're dependent upon your political opponents for your own financing. This is crazy stuff. It's got to be stopped. So the other one's compulsory superannuation, where everyone gets to pay 12% of their earnings, give it to the ALP, because all the super funds now are ALP funds, right? Thank you, Jane Hume, for that, and ScoMo. I don't know whether they realised that or not, but I'm sure they would have. Effectively, they are now all ALP funds. So everyone pays 12% of their money, and at 65 they get it back with some interest. You know, what? Meanwhile, they can't buy a house, so they end up becoming dependent upon the government, so they turn into Labor voters. This is crazy. So we've got to put this in the object so that the members of Parliament know that this stuff is not acceptable anymore. Where's my next one? So union funding, by the way, just so you know how it works. You know, when you've got about 20,000 members, sort of we're in that range, right? Nearly 25,000. It costs about $400 a head. You got 40,000 members, it costs $300 a head. And if you've got 60,000 members, which like the nurses have, teachers have got 50,000, it costs $200. There are actually economies of scale. So the QNMU and QTU charge $750. So you got $500 by 110,000. I can't do maths. I used to be a maths teacher, dreadful. It's at 55 million a year. The CFMEU charges $2,000 per annum. There's 20,000 of them. So we know it costs $400, right? So there's $1,500 left. So that's 30 million a year. Where's that go? What's it do? So how it's done, of course, they don't actually send the money. There's people working in the CFMEU who are working on Labor Party projects all the time. Plus they move the money off into not-for-profits and moves all over the place. And let me give you a truth bomb, because I know a little bit about construction sites. You know, we kept the CFMEU off the sites. Back, it's 30 years ago, I figured out that the Master Builders Association and the CFMEU are in partnership. And they still are. They're in commercial partnership. Even today, they've got 5 or 6 entities which are commercial partnerships. And yet supposedly they're at war with each other. I can tell you. And I've spoken to a few builders, you know, now, and I've just asked the question, you know, how are the guys? What's the tie? What's the you know, how are they? I know the questions to ask. I can tell you, there's 20,000 CFMEU workers in Queensland. 19,000 would leave tomorrow if they thought they could go onto a construction site and work without a CFMEU ticket, right? Might be only 18,000. It wouldn't be any less than that. But they can't. And it's the LNP who won't let them, right? They've got to go. You can't just say, oh, you go nothing. You need to set up the alternatives. Really easy to do. They won't do it. But you do that, of course, well, you can't have an inquiry into the CFMEU now, can you? Right? So they would rather 30 million go to the ALP than Yeah, okay. Enough said. Rightio, getting to the end there. Object changes. Now, just a couple of things. There's a whole series of bits and pieces. This is the classic one. If we want to win, if we're going to be serious as a political party, the Liberal Party, you have to win the Senate. That means you have to get enough senators. Now, James talked about the Constitution. One of the particular things that our founding fathers did was they looked at the American experience and how difficult it was to start a new state. And they said, that's too difficult, we have a really simple system here, and we do. All it's required for any area to be a new state is for that area and the people in it to have a referendum, and if they vote yes, they're a new state. That's it. That's it. The problem has been, of course, the state government, where they're going to be chopped out of, they're the only ones who can decide whether you can have a referendum. And I think it was actually probably a mistake in the Constitution. But we can get around that. You know, it could become part of the driving objective of a Liberal Party to say, well, we're about subsidiarity, we want decentralisation, we want more states and we want more Conservative senators. So we should talk about it. And actually, I did some rough numbers here. If we created three states in Queensland, remember 200,000 was a stateful at Federation. You do the rough numbers, you'd have a southwest, middle and top. The LNP would pick up, because what happens is the nexus, we don't get 12 senators. The total number of states is 72. So if we create another 3 states, what happens is everyone goes down to 8. Boom, boom. So we'd have 20 and Labor would get probably about 12 in the Queensland area as we know it. So we've got to talk about this. You know, this is stuff that you cannot leave to politicians. And, yes, exactly. Finally, the problem with staffers. Once upon a time, members of Parliament, I should get very close, once upon a time members of Parliament came from all walks of life. And then what happened, see, our politicians are very good at following rules. Very good at following rules. They never question where they came from. And I think John Howard even made the comment that, the parties got together and decided it would be a good idea if everyone got an allocation of 3 or 4 or 5 staffers or something. So what happens is, who determined that? Labor Party did. So this is how much you can pay them. So they're not good enough so that you can get anyone good. You just get pests, right? So how do we get rid of that? Surely, at present, our parliamentarians they're employees of whom? Of whom? You know, and really, I haven't done the actual numbers, but surely it'd be around about $2 million, wouldn't it? The cost, by the time you pay for the staffers of the office, you pay the salary of the MP. They get all these bloody mailing allowances and all that. Whatever it is, let's say it's $2 million. Why don't we just say, have $2 million? You do it all. Wouldn't that be interesting? Well, for a start, I can tell you how many staffers are being employed in the country. A quarter. You can bugger all. There's some good ones out there, but you'd pay them $250,000 a year, the good ones. Most of them you wouldn't feed. Okay, no, but this is the reality of it. And why shouldn't it's going to be cheaper for the taxpayers, and you're going to get a better class of bloody people, aren't you? People who have been successful in business are going to say, look, I'll have a go at that. I could run that. You know, we've got the old offices there, we don't need to pay any of that, boom, boom, boom. We've got to talk about it. Right? This is the stuff we need to talk about. So, in summary, what we're going to do, because we're going to take this to every state, we're going to develop a specific constitutional model. The delegate system is unexplainable. You remember Spaghetti Junction that was up there before? You can't explain. I can't even. I've been there for 45 years. I didn't even understand. Someone asked me, how many delegates are there? I said, shit, I don't know. You know, James, Senator McGrath knows, but he knows every single one. But most people don't, and you can never explain it. We don't need it. There's no reason today with modern communication why the members can't do everything. The members can have a convention, they can elect the president, and every position in the party should be elected. Right? Simple as. And that way, and you take away the pre-selection problem for people, it's just the members who do it, we'll win. So we're going to workshop the model throughout Queensland, take the model interstate, look for volunteers. So anyone here wants to volunteer to help us, because we need that. I'll tell you what, that's why we're a bit of a stuff up tonight, because, excuse me, Heath and I are a bit bloody rusty on some of the stuff. But, and we need to find some financial supporters, particularly in the other states, who can come in, and we don't need a lot of money. It's mainly just administrative costs, right? We don't got to do any advertising campaigns or any of that sort of rubbish. We just need to get people on the ground to work and build the model. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that we can do it. We are going to save Australia. We're going to reclaim the dream for people, and we're going to get 250,000 members. I'd like you all been doing it. Thank you. Rightio. We're going to hand over to Matthew.
You take a seat. So now we have some time for some Q&A. So James, Heath, if you guys like to come down here. I've got a couple of mics, and so open questions. I hope you have a good idea of what it's all about now, and keen to hear your questions for these guys. Let's hope these mics work.
I normally sit on the right. No, just don't worry.
This mic. Testing.
I have to always turn right.
We don't have the mics on yet.
Feels weird being able to run the left.
I've done that. Yeah, mics are both on. Not on. Anyway, here's the mic for you once it works. First question.
Blue. Full. And it doesn't work.
They don't work. Don't. We can sing now.
The Liberal Party has been infiltrated by the left at a very high level over the last probably 10 years, I guess. They actively discourage Conservative membership. How do we overcome that?
Yeah, that was sort of the point I made to you. If one tribe's got control, they've got to keep another tribe out, right? Because in a small party, you get tribal control by the measure that I just pointed out. And so they stop membership. Any sort of excuse, you know. Well, we lost your application. That's all this sort of stuff. So how do we stop it? Ultimately, we've got to make this place big enough, the argument big enough and public enough, so that there's not just the politicians who want to close this down. They don't want any threats to their pre-selections. Okay, so that's it. That's not easy, but that's what we're going to start doing.
Right. Could people introduce themselves so we know who's asking the question?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Actually, that's a...
will come out to the individuals who ask questions. I'm not joking. People in this room introduce themselves by name. Well, yeah.
Okay. What David was saying is that the people that are here might get picked on by the LNP. So it's up to you. If you're worried about that, you can just say I'm X, and we'll repeat the question if it's not someone else.
Someone in the back.
I'm XY. Very few Liberals understand that.
It's over there.
Very much. Yeah, my name's Roger Hooper. I will confess.
What's happened to your mic? Hang on, mic's died.
No, there is a principle in sales where we're considered in the company that I work for that it takes a lot more effort to turn around a disgruntled customer than to just go out and find a new one. Now, we look at the world of the Conservative voter, and it's highly fractured across Australia, and it's probably the same situation in the UK, Canada, USA, with minor parties perhaps, I'm not sure. But definitely it is here. We've got Australia, one whatever. There's a whole world of this. Now, do you guys feel that rather than try to bring them all together, which could be like herding kittens, maybe we just need to focus on just bringing in fresh people? Like looking around here, there aren't many people I've seen before, definitely in the LNP. So it does look like a fresh group of people in so many ways. How do you feel about that concept?
Where's our noise?
Just had to change the batteries.
Grab the other one too.
Gonna get my eyesight checked when you described the crowd as fresh. I thought, oh. So, just kidding, of course. So look, this is where the voting system matters. So if you didn't have the voting system that Australia has, which is sort of a protection racket for the Libs and Labour, what you find is that at some point an insurgent party can take over. So we're looking at what could be the end of the world's oldest continuously run political party, which is the Conservative Party of the UK. They are now polling in fourth spot. Nigel Farage, and a party that didn't even exist 3 years ago, is got more support than Labour and the Conservatives put together. And I mean, unless something astounding happens, he will win the next election. In Australia, and that's because you only go in and you tick one name. In Australia, I got so angry when Abbott got rolled by Turnbull that I said in The Spectator, everyone should preference Labour. People said, oh, you're crazy. And then they'd go, well, I didn't vote for the Liberals. I said, where did you put them? I put them fourth. Where did you put Labour? Fifth. I said, you voted for the Liberals. You don't understand your own voting system. We are forced to choose between Labour and Liberals. It doesn't matter where you put them on the vote. At some point, you have to pick. That's the problem. So if you just are angry at both the main parties, you cannot express that other than by going and just, doing a donkey vote after you arrive, just drawing a line through it or go, F off. You could do that. And so it forces you to pick. Whereas in Britain or Canada or the US, you can just go and vote for a third-party insurgent, not because you want them to win, but because you're so angry at your own side of politics. And they will respond to that, because at some point, like right now, according to the latest poll, the Liberal Party, if you disaggregate them from the Nats, they barely have more support than One Nation. Well, if this were Canada or Britain, they would be panic stations. But not here, because they know that at some point, even if you put other parties, you're going to have to pick. This is a problem with the voting system. And so it's hard to see how you can fix it other than changing the rules with how you pick party leaders. That is doable. That's what Graeme said. Trying to fix the voting system, why would Labour or Liberals ever vote to change the voting system? It helps them both. Even though, the Liberals could be consigned to opposition forever, they still get to hang out in Parliament and have a chauffeur and, come back late from parties and do stuff in Parliament. I just speculate there. But, there's real problems. It has to be fixed indirectly, partly, I think, by changing how we pick the party leader. And that would fix it. In an indirect way, that would fix things very quickly. There's no way that Turnbull could ever have rolled Abbott if the party membership picked. They might have got rid of Abbott, but never would they have put Turnbull in. Or, the party membership is not going to put in a woman who's for the voice, for a treaty, for pseudo over deeming. Just go down the list. She's against fossil fuels. It's not going to happen. So that's how we have to fix it, in my view.
I have no opinion. It's a can of worms, but I think where Graeme has sort of created his thought process in the whole thing, there is an opportunity for people to start to make a change and to take the fight back to the oligopoly that we currently have to put up with. It's not working, it's not going to work, and under the current systems of executive structure, the general public are being taken for fools, and most of them are not fools, but it will take a hard time for us all to come around to doing something positive, and we need a lot of help.
Just before you ask the question, sir, let me just refer back to refer back to Tony Abbott. Where's my water? You got any water? I'm just a bit. He's a bit bloody grim, isn't it? Doesn't matter. Oh, here it is. When Tony Abbott was removed, under the Canadian system, we would introduce a trigger, so the parliamentarians could actually get rid of Abbott, but they can't get rid of him. They can only bring him to a ballot of the members. Then the members would decide. And the mechanism of change would be someone else would have to stand up and say, well, I'll be the alternate candidate. So what do you reckon the chances of an alternate candidate against Abbott would have succeeded with the members? 0. So that's the mechanism. What it does, it gives the leader huge authority, because no longer do they have to put deadheads into very important jobs to keep them out of the road so they're not plotting in the background against the leader. This is very real. Very real. And you can see it in local and in all levels of government. Okay, so I just want to cover that. Thank you, sir. Your question.
I'm John Murray from Ballarat, Victoria, and been with the Liberal Party over many years. Recently changed to the National Party because I was absolutely fed up with the closed shop of the Liberal Party in Victoria. Now, after what happened with Ron Wilson appointing his little daughter Jess, you'll find that they will struggle at the state election next November to even have candidates to run in seats. And at the last state election in Ballarat, which is 120,000 people, I had to get the handout how to vote people, and I had old ladies on walking frames trying to hand out how to vote. They're now too old. Next November, they won't only have trouble finding people to stand in seats, they won't have anyone to hand out how to vote. The members are walking away as of this, what happened to Brad Batten, they're just walking away. So my prediction for November is Jess will have to go out and do the lot herself, because the members have had a guts full of Kennett, Picciuto, and the little half a dozen to 10 people in Melbourne, the Blue Bloods, trying to run the state and refuse to listen to members. I'd love to see what's going to happen next November. My prediction is it'll be a bloodbath. Yeah. And Labor will walk back in laughing.
Well, the upside of having elderly people with Zimmer frames is that they can park right in front of the booth, which is probably pretty good. No, there's no answer to that. I just couldn't believe they put her in. It's, I mean, she's articulate. She got a very soft interview from Credlin last night. I watched it. She sort of asked, but it was a very soft interview.
Sadly, she's a lawyer, and I had 14 years as a policeman. I can know what lawyers are like, and so do the public.
I can't disagree. I was a lawyer before I became a law professor. We did learn to tell jokes before we gave clients massive bills. For instance, what's the difference between a dead lawyer on the highway and a dead snake? Skid marks in front of the snake. The lawyerly class is terrible right now, terrible.
Under these changes, will there be a method of the members with the policy? Will they have any involvement with policy, or is it more of a hope of getting the right people there to do the policy?
No, that's a very good question. No, the members have got to be involved in policy, but you've got to take the policy process in the party back to the local areas, because they know. And policies aren't that complicated. I mean, I was in the policy area in the National Party and the LNP when we actually did stuff, and we actually did talk to the local areas. And we put stuff together. Of course, the sad part was the politicians just ignored it all. That's the sad part. But you need to go back always to the members, and there's a sort of a tension between the members and the parliamentarians. And the key part is you need to have compulsory competitive pre-selections 12 months before every election. Not just, you know, pat, I've done a very good job. No, you need to go out and you need to recruit people who may be contenders. And the best way to do that is to go into local government. You can't be a proper government in this country unless you're prepared to be in all levels of government. And the only reason, you know, the LNP and the Liberals aren't really in the council elections because the state members and the federal members don't want competition, right? That's big. That's a big part of it. Oh, local government shouldn't have politics. What bullshit. You know, so you've got to get into that, and you need to set up a competitive environment. And, you know, the members will then... See, we've got modern technology now. You can have Zoom meetings with 500 people where you can have a pre-selection, every member in an area. Right, most of them only got 50 members, but where I'm in Maroochydore is actually... Fiona Simpson's got over 500 members. That should be the standard right throughout Australia. Minimum 500 members for a state... 500 members of the party for every state electorate. So you can do that. And then you create this tension. And no one's chasing for delegateships because there are no delegates. There's just members. They go, they make the selection, they go to the conferences, have a good time and talk about bigger issues because these people are interested. So, you know, it's not as if there aren't places that work. And Canada has particularly worked. I mean, they had a monster bomb out, didn't they, 20 years ago? 180 seats to 2. Yeah, the Progressive Conservative Party there were. How's that one work? It's like, yeah. Okay, next question.
Tim Ferrier. I think I'm well qualified to ask a question because I'm a former member of the LNP and I'm an ex-lawyer. That apart, my question is principally directed to Graeme, but James and Heath may wish to comment as well. I'm very interested in this organisation, but I'm just wondering, and when you got to the slide about what your plan of attack was, something like that, I thought, I won't need to ask a question, but maybe I'm a bit dim. But if your organisation does grow, as I think it will, and I certainly hope it will, it doesn't overcome the fact that the Liberal Party is the entrenched opposition in most cases in the parliaments and the ones who have the power, if they were in power. So how do you actually see the growth of your organisation? And it has to be in the relatively short term, within 5 years, I would have thought, to actually change the Liberal Party and the way it operates, the executives, the members, and the qualification and the ability to become a member. But it's how you see it actually working.
Yes. Well, I think what we're trying to do is set up like a parallel structure. Somebody's touching me there. There was like a parallel structure and alongside. We're not replacing the Liberal Party, but we'll be public, and we will keep everything we do public. We're picking up at this stage because people, you can join. I hope you all join us, by the way, because it's free. We haven't got our little money collector thing yet. Might have it shortly. So you better be quick. If you're a Liberal Party member, it's free, right? If you want to, 2/3 of the people that have already joined us want to be members of the Liberal Party, but not how it is. For you guys, it's going to be $20. That'll help. That'll defray some of our administration costs. You know, that's all we need. Yeah. So what was the game? The question was, how are we going to see the change? Well, you get that going. There's 25,000 say members, Liberal members in Australia. You know, I reckon we'll get 10,000. You know, over time they'll join because they want to see what's going on. They know the party's not working. You know, we're getting feedback from all over the country. It's all the same. It just needs to be an alternative, and ultimately you win it in the local areas. You know, with someone will take up the cudgel in a particular country area and say, well, how come the Liberal Reform Association and all my mates were more of us in this mob here than in the Liberal Party? Run that in the local paper. It starts to wake people up, doesn't it? The thing is, ultimately, the politicians will come on side because they will do anything to keep the job. Menzies, when he set up the Liberal Party, he was a member of the United Australia Party. It was a splinter group. But he was smart enough to not involve the UAP politicians. He set it up with real people, right? And they set up the Liberal Party. And then when they had it going, they turned around to the United Australia politicians and said, would you like to join us on our conditions? And they said, shit, yeah, because we don't have a job. So ultimately, that's what I reckon will happen here. The politicians will see this is not going to work the way we are, and they'll start to move across. You don't need to have very many. They're very much like sheep. What's the collective noun for politicians? A flock. A flock. You know, a sheep flock. Yeah, think about it, right? A few of them will break away, then they'll all start scattering across. So I'm not trying to demean them, but the politicians are a different breed. And we should always compare them, not to ourselves, but to what there would be if they weren't there. And we should thank our lucky stars that they're there rather than their alternative. Yes, Marion.
Thank you, Graeme. Just like to respond to the comment or the question about policy. How would policy be set? As part of the process of selecting the opposition leader, I would hope that we would have primaries similar to what they do in Canada and USA and most other democracies. And that's where the policies would be thrashed out, as you would see with the Trump debates. When Trump knocked off all the other opponents, we heard what his policies were. And then that successful opposition leader has really got a mandate with the policies, because he's been elected by the membership. He can then hold his shadow cabinet accountable to deliver on those policies. Am I correct?
Well, you've got... the selection of the parliamentary leader would be only by the members. What's the point of being a member if you don't get to vote on that? No, you pay $20 and you get to vote on that. So the primary system works well in America because everyone registers to be a Republican or a Democrat, and so sort of that's everyone's sort of in the party, whereas we're slightly different. The key is you must have a large number. You can't have 50 people deciding on a lead, or you can't have 500 people or 1,000 people deciding on a leadership. You need 50, 100,000 people. Then you get an accurate bloody assessment of who's going to be the best leaders. Not that it's hard in Australia. We all know the names of the people, don't we? You people would choose to be Prime Minister if there was a vote of the members. We'll start in Western Australia, Hasty, go to the middle, Jacinta, up to Queensland, Canavan, down south, Barnaby on the way. He's a leader. he's a bloody leader. And Antic, and throw in Tony Abbott. Anyway, have I missed a name? There's not a big lot, are they? So we all know who the leaders are. And this is the thing. When we played sport as youngsters, we all knew who the captain of the team was, wouldn't we? It's a tribal thing. We can pick leaders. We know who can lead. So, yes, another one?
Good evening.
Rachel.
XX and a lawyer, so be gentle. Firstly, Heath, thank you for tonight and hosting. It's been lovely. My question is about the evolution of political parties, yet the very old representative democracy framework that we have inherited from Britain and the United States. What we've seen over the last 20, 30 years is what I'll call the professionalisation of politics. We've had politicians who have been staffers from day one, and they've learnt the ropes, and they've been in Canberra and they've worked their way up. And that's who now our politicians are. And it's very inward, it's very internal within the political party. We no longer look at those who are in the front line, who are successful business people, lawyers, teachers, small business people, no, they're cast out, yet arguably they would know the most. But instead we look at the one who's been a member of a party for 10, 15 years and who's worked for this person, who's been a policy advisor, been a media advisor. My concern is, how do we in contemporary society balance this need for a very professional, focused politician who understands the rigmarole that happens in Parliament, whether it's George Street or Canberra. They've been around it for so long, they know how it works, they know the game, opposed to representative democracy, which is about finding a true representative, a successful person, an experienced person who can represent their constituents. Because that is the problem, and I should state, I'm a former LNP state executive member for 3 years, and I've been in the membership of the party for over 30 years. I'm a spring chicken. What I've seen more and more in the last 10 years is this incredible internal jobs for mates attitude, no meritocracy, and they disguise it, they guise it under the cover of professionalisation. This is what you need to do in order to be in politics and to be a successful representative. How do we bring it back to the grassroots and allow that to happen? How do you do it?
Well, I'll start, and congratulations on joining the party when you were 2. 12. So I agree with you completely on the first claim about political parties having changed. I mean, many people don't realize that across the Anglosphere and probably the democratic world, rich people now vote left. I mean, the evidence on this is overwhelming. Hillary Clinton won the 100 wealthiest counties in the US. Boris Johnson did not win a wealthy seat. The obsession with teal inner city seats is just crazy. Right of center parties do not, and I'm generalizing, obviously there's outliers, rich people don't vote for us. We have the suburbs, we have the majority of people, but if you're going to focus on trying to convince the wealthiest part of Melbourne, you're going to be dealing with people who are completely cost insensitive when it comes to energy costs. Those constituencies we should not care about. If the stock market collapses, they'll come back to us. But so that part, I agree with you. And you know, the political spectrum has completely switched, partly because left-wing parties, when I was growing up, the Dennis Healey sort of Labour Party were concerned with redistribution of wealth. I can sort of respect that. I don't agree with it, but I respect those people. They knew what a woman was. You know, they were sane on everything, and they just wanted more redistribution of wealth. It's a fair debate. Those people don't run left-wing parties. They're now human rights barristers like Keir Starmer, and you know, they attract some of the wealthiest public servants. Where I don't agree with you, I think, is the claim, and you might have been putting this in the mouth of other people, the 2 most successful politicians in the last 20 years in the democratic world were complete outsiders, Donald Trump and Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage made Brexit happen. He made a party out of nothing, and he's done it in a way that just puts the lie to this question that you want professionalized politicians. It's a complete lie. I would not let any party that I want to vote for pick staffers who have sort of been career politicians. Show me that you've done something with your life first, and then you go into politics. Now, there are exceptions to that. I mean, Winston Churchill got into Parliament when he was 26, but people forget that while he got elected to Parliament, he was the highest paid journalist in the world. He was the highest paid writer for 10 years, Churchill. So he was doing something else at a world-class level. And so our problem is we get really good people like John Roscombe running in Victoria for pre-selection twice, and he doesn't get through pre-selection because they don't want him. And he would be, so, you know, again, it comes back to controlling the parties. Prosciutto beat him, yes. I mean, and so, you know, okay, it's cost Prosciutto a bit of money in the long run. And the party is paying for Prosciutto. I mean, again, you know, my wife is not vindictive, and she couldn't believe that they're going to step in and sort of subsidize his costs. So we have to do this indirectly because of our voting system and because it's so hard for a, you know, part of me would like to see the National Party break away from the Libs, join up with One Nation, and get a few of the conservative because once they became more than half, the Liberal Party would wilt away. It would be gone. And you know, the sort of moderate, which is just a word for New Labour wing of the Liberal Party, they are parasites or cuckoos on the sort of conservative base. And as soon as you could flip that, they'd be in big trouble. But you know, the politicians don't have any vision. I don't know, it's a problem right now. It'll change eventually, but it could get bad. I mean, it was 90 years before Argentina turned things around. Almost 100.
I'm just looking at the time. We'll go one more question and then we'll wrap up.
Thanks. Andrew Cooper from CPAC. Jim, you're a CPAC veteran, and Graeme, you are too, and Heath, you're about to be a new attendee. Look, one of the things that confuses me with this plan that you have, Graeme, I'll just be frank, is that you've got the party that won't accept members that aren't the right members. Like I've got 10,000 Queenslanders that are members of CPAC. 3,000 of them are members of the LNP. 7,000 aren't members. They're members of different organisations, you know, One Nation, Libertarians, blah, blah, blah. But I'd say 3,000 of them would be happy to be LNP members if they felt welcome or if their applications would be accepted. With 3,000 members, you could take over the LNP, right? But they can't get in. And my question to you is, how do you make constitutional change if you can't get the members in to vote for the constitutional change? So the gap in my understanding of this whole plan is, how are you going to bloody pull this off, mate?
Watch me. No, that's a bit easy to say. Look, it's not going to be easy, but you have to go in a different direction. You can never win a battle, you never win a war, or you can't win a battle if you fight on your enemy's bloody battleground. So their battleground is they want you to come inside so they can close you down, or they want to close you off. So what we're doing, we're outside, we're creating a new battleground, right? And we will fight the battle outside because there are people like, as you said, look at Matthew Sheehan's mob. You know, the interesting thing, I picked up a bit of stuff which really quite, it was really quite strange. There is an aversion to third-party operators in the Liberal Party against your mob. They don't like Sheehan. You know, Graham Young's AIP, Australian Institute of Progress. You know, no politician will ever go to that. You know, they treat us, they see us as a threatening tribe. You know, well, clearly we're not a tribe. Let's just say the broad membership, we want to get 75,000 people, so I suppose that's a threat to them. Look, we just got to get in and do it. And one of the big arguments we got, and I started to talk about these objects, we've got to start to argue down what is this business about lobbyists? The registered lobbyist, that is an exercise of legislating to legalise graft. That's what lobbyist is, right? Now, we must licence them. It's bullshit. It's legalising graft. And the other thing we've got to do, the politicians made the rules for bribery, right? So, you know, I want to bribe you, sir. I'm going to give you so much if you do so and so. I've just broken the law, right? Because I've offered a bribe. And if you accept you've broken the law, it's okay. We're both okay. Because you talk, you go to jail, I go to jail, I talk, we both go to jail, we both got to shut up. How easy is this to fix? What you do is you just make it a one-way crime. So it's not illegal to offer a bribe. I'll give you $50 if you do that. Are you going to accept? I'm clear. It's not what I've done is not a crime. If you accept, you've broken the law, and you can go to jail. Anytime I can say you didn't do it anyway, so he should bloody go to jail. That's how you do it. You just make it a one-way crime. It would stop overnight. And let's see the politicians come out and say, oh, no, we can't do that. So there's some moral grounds, and we can introduce and get rid of all this bloody commercial and confidence stuff and start to talk about, you know, real values, which we all have to live by, but politicians don't. So there's arguments we can make. We've just got to think sideways.
Well, I have to say I sort of agree with Andrew. I mean, I'm all for this, but I'd like to know how a party that won't let anyone join is going to be reformed. It's not going to be easy. I mean, you could try to join I could wear my kilt and pretend I'm transitioning. They might let me in. But, you know, these are desperate sort of ploys. Yeah, I mean, so it's not going to be easy.
I think everyone in the room's got a query of how the hell can you do it, and I'm not too certain that it's doable. The only thing I'm talking about at the moment is everyone, and the word is they've had a gutful, so let's put some fire underneath the feet and the asses of these fellows, and if a lot of people do come on board, I think a weight of number, 20, 30, 50, 70,000 start coming onto our platform, then you can start to put an argument against those who will not allow anyone into their tent. And we will be from the outside pissing in, not from the inside pissing out. And I think under those circumstances you can have a different weight of activity to do something. But it won't be easy. And I think you need other mediums to help you in prosecuting your arguments and highlighting, as Graeme's just pointed out, the graft, the corruption, the theft that is endemic in this nation. I say we came from convicts and we haven't moved far, unfortunately. And the ones who are worst at it are sitting in office as our operators. And I think if we don't all have a crack at doing something about it, as I say, if everyone does nothing, nothing will change. But how we go about it, and these questions are very valid, but all we've started is how the hell can we start to change what the hell's broken? And that's where I would sit. Yes, Dave.
May I ask, is David Goodwin in a position to ask, to tell us what he thinks about people getting barred from the LNP? And there's this little guy, I don't know if anyone ran into him, he's a CPAC guy, Barclay McDane has been barred from the LNP.
I've been barred.
He's a wonderful little conservative thinker and fighter. His crime was he got a lot of young people to try and join up, and he was accused of grandstanding. And I'm thinking to myself, what's this mean there exactly? You know, they say the average age of the LNP is 72. He's a guy that was going to, and I met him a couple of times, and I'm very impressed with him. He's a genuine guy who wants to introduce fresh young blood into the party, and he got stomped on.
Does anybody in the room know somebody who got a membership refused of the LNP?
I'm working on it today, apparently.
No, you're in. You might get punted. The reality is it's become the most exclusive club in town. It's very difficult to get into. It should not be so. The reality is, if you haven't tried to get in and you're in this room, my only entreaty to you is try and get in, because then you don't have to pay Graeme $20 to be part of his show. And I genuinely say that to everybody in this room. I don't know, I haven't seen any Ivan Milat's in the room, and you should all have a crack. And then if you don't make it in, by all means, share your story with everybody else as to why you think maybe you didn't get in. But as somebody who is a member, and I'm just here to observe, Des, just here to observe, the reality is I would like to certainly have everybody in this room as a member inside the LNP. I think you'd make a great contribution. And the more people that come in, maybe one day we'll make Barclay our mascot. He's a great young bloke. He's terrific. He's like a Charlie Kirk. In fact, if Charlie Kirk were alive today, he probably couldn't become a member either. But I'm not joking. I mean, I can see you shaking your head, but it's probably true.
No, I'm nodding. I'm shaking my head in disgust.
But to be honest, there is a few older people here, so you guys are probably a little bit more camouflaged. Put your membership in. Then you get a free membership to Graham's show. Come on, we need a few helpers.
Over there. Yep. Got a microphone for it?
So, Graeme, I just wanted to make a point. I mean, definitely the opposition is there, and I suppose there's a lot more I can do from the inside, though I have been, frankly, quite exhausted. I spend more energy fighting the LNP than the Labor Party and the Greens. But, saying that, I have gone and called up Secretariat and said, hi, Roger Hoover here. A friend of mine's trying to get into the party. Can you just hurry that up, please? And they're tired of fighting with me. And I was amazed. It's like, what? They let him in like that? And I just wonder if we just need a few more of us on the inside, just making those friendly calls to the Secretary to say, hey, can you just speed this up, please? He's a friend of mine. He's really good. We've got an election coming, and you know how much we all hate the Greens, don't you? You know, they're just stroking the silly idiots, and it'll work.
Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up now, everybody. Good discussion going on. Let's keep it happening. How do we volunteer? Sign up on the website to start with, so we've got everyone in there, and we can send more information through. But certainly, we should put some contact forms up and stuff as well, so we can get more details as well. Because yes, helping out would be great. But on behalf of Heath and Graeme, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Keep the discussion going, and join us, and let's all reclaim the dream. That's the goal.
Just quickly, if you want a few more drinks, there's plenty out there, because I wouldn't mind a couple myself. Thank you for all coming. It's not an easy task, and those questions were very valid. How the fuck are you going to do it? I don't know how we're going to do it all.
No, but you just
we'll get around to it.
We're on our way out.
So, how do we join? I've already joined, but how do we volunteer?